So when you're ready to start setting up your model, there's two things that you need to consider. You need to consider the constraints, so what's basically holding the model in space, and so it doesn't just float wherever it wants, and then the loads. Now when working with constraints, every single type is defined within a singular dialog box. So you can see that I selected constraints from the ribbon tab. Another option is also, let's just cancel this. Another option is from the model tab. Within the model tree, I can right click on constraints and I can select new. So it launches the constraint dialog box, and I'm going to rename this to fixed because that's the type I'm going to create. Now the ID is what Nastran will give it. It's basically a unique number to identify this one versus every other constraint you're going to create. And then we can create two types. So structural, as we can see here, is providing me all these options for translation, which are the T's, the rotations, and then there's some preset ones that I can pick. Now if I pick thermal, what happens is, notice that the only option here is to set the temperature. So if I want to apply a thermal constraint, I set the temperature and then pick the face that I want to apply that to. Now I'm going to go back to structural, and what I do is I select the entities that I want to apply this to. So notice I can select faces, edges, or vertexes. So I'm going to spin the model around, and I want to select this bottom face here. So I'm going to select this face. I'm going to select this face, and notice that both of the faces are now listed within the dialog. Now if I right click on here, I have some options here. I have some options to do things like delete. So perhaps that's not the face I wanted. I can do a clear all to deselect everything. And then I can right click in here and I can say, okay, let's select edges. And now notice that I'm only selecting edges. If I right click in here and I say select vertices, now I'm only selecting points. Again, obviously if I right click and select faces, now what's happening is I'm selecting faces, edges, and vertices. So I can be specific, or as you can see as I move my cursor around, I can select anything. So you can use this to help you filter out what type of components or what type of objects you're selecting. Now what face chain will do is that if I leave this off right now, and notice that if I was to pick this face, it only selects that face. If I was to pick in here and I was to pick face chain and then pick that face, it's going to pick anything that's connected to that face. So you can see that it picked quite a few more faces in this instance. So let's just do a clear all and let's turn off face chain. So a lot of options buried right into that little right click option there. So again, I'm going to pick these two bottom faces because those are the faces I want fixed, because that's really where it's going to sit on top of the table or workbench that it's on. What subcases are we applying this to? Now I only have one subcase in here, but if I want this to be fixed across all subcases, then I can actually select the subcases and it will add that constraint to each subcase. So it's a great way, instead of having to go back and copy them into each one. From here, I can see that I can change display options. So we'll just leave this at the default right now. And if I click the little preview option, I am going to get a little preview of the constraint. So you can see that it's going to apply it to the bottom, and perhaps I'd like this to be a little bit larger, and we can see the symbol. So this isn't doing anything with the amount of constraint that it's going to apply. This is just simply for the symbol. And I'm actually going to make this orange. Actually, let's make it dark red so that I can kind of differentiate it, since my model happens to be blue. And I'm going to increase the density because I want a few more shown across the bottom of the model, so it's a little bit clear where that constraint's been applied. Okay, so like I said, I'm just going to work with the fixed, which means it's going to be fixed in all directions and all rotations. And I am going to click OK, and we can see that that has now been applied. It's been added. It's called fixed because, remember, I named it fixed. It's not because I picked the fixed type. It's because I named it fixed. And we can see that it's been applied to the bottom. Now, if I right click on it, I can do an edit, and it will put me right back into the exact same dialog. So if I wanted to add some faces, I wanted to remove some faces. So perhaps I'd also like to pick this face and add that face, and we can see they've been selected. So we'll click OK, and we've updated that. Now with constraints, if you want to edit them we already talked about, but notice I can also copy them. So if I want to copy this to a different subcase, that's where I can right click and pick copy, and then I can copy that into the other subcases. So you can see right here that it's available, and I can copy and paste it. So this is for defining the constraints. If I want to manage their visibility, I go into the actual analysis itself, and I go into the subcase and say, okay, this is great, but I don't really want to see it. So it's still there, it's still being applied. It's just the fact that I can turn the visibility of it on or off. So that's the process of adding constraints to your analysis.